ready? It's the Roundtable with me, Robert Bannon.
Welcome to the Roundtable, everybody. My name is Robert Bannon. I'm so excited if you're listening to us on the Broadway Podcast Network or you're watching us on YouTube. It's great to be here. You know, I was born in the 80s and I was a child of Broadway and theater growing up in the 90s, especially mid to late 90s. So in 97, before the movie Titanic came out, the musical came out. It made a lot of buzz because it was very expensive. People thought no one would be interested in the Titanic. It was before Leonardo DiCaprio did not make it and survive, and Kate Winslet kicked him off that door, floating in the Arctic. And the show got a lot of buzz because Rosie O'Donnell's show was on at the time. She had the cast on the show. It was a big to-do, and Maury Yeston wrote Nine, wrote Grand Hotel, wrote a ton of theater of the 90s and been revived and be doing it forever. And before Encore's put Titanic out next year in 2024, it's coming out as a screening event at a Fathom event in 700 movie theaters. So how cool is that? You can see Titanic on November 4th and 8th in cinemas, the UK production. Maury's a legend. He ran the BMI workshop forever. Anyone who's a writer or knows anything about writing knows Maury and Broadway, and he's here joining us now. You know, it's always trouble when a couple of Jersey boys get together. And, you know, especially Hudson County Jersey boys, you know, then you know you're really in trouble. Jersey City's own Tony Awards. I remember the year. I remember seeing Titanic. I remember my parents taking me. I remember the lookout coming down from the ceiling of the Broadway theater. And now, Maury, you're no stranger to big screens and his stories being told in theaters. Titanic comes to theaters for 2 nights. Maury, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, and a great reunion for us Jersey, our cityites. You know, Jerry Herman, the great Jerry Herman, not only came from Jersey City, his mother, Ruth Herman, was an extraordinary singer, and she was the queen of the Jewish Community Center in Jersey City. And his parents owned a summer camp called Camp Stissing Lake, and I went to that summer camp. And in fact, Jerry was a senior counselor there, and he's very, very, really a formative influence on my life. I was very young. I went there. I think I was about 7 the first year I was there, and there was a magician. And Jerry, of course, had been a teenager, and he had already started writing his musicals. He had written his first few shows, and he was the senior counselor and the music counselor. And a magician came and did his job, but in the middle of his show, I had to go to the bathroom. And so one of the counselors, I was so young, it was young women who took care of us, not even guys. Yes. The young woman took me to the bunk and brought me back. And by the time she brought back from the bunk, the show was finished. And there was nothing but bare benches. And I sat on the bench and I refused to leave, because I wanted to see what I missed. And Jerry Herman came and sat next to me. He was probably 19 or 20 at the time. And he put his arm around me and he explained to me very carefully something I've never forgotten, which is basically, Maury, when the show is over, the show is over. And he and I talked about it so often, years and years and years later. The great Jerry Herman.
I
was so close.
You have been close to some of the greatest,
yeah,
and yourself writers.
Yeah.
You know, you grow up, and we're going to get to Titanic and the big screen and all of that. But
sure.
You grow up in Jersey City.
Yeah.
You have a family who loves music.
Yeah.
You end up going to Yale and studying in Cambridge and all this fancy dancy stuff, and then you start coming up the ranks with Alan Menken and Howard Ashman and you know Ed Kleban and Tommy Tune does your work. Like what
I'll give you the sequence, which is interesting. So of course there we were in Jersey City, and I just started writing music, right? I mean, when I took piano lessons, the minute I started taking piano lessons, I started making up music. Of course, Jersey City is just a train ride away from New York. My mother loved musical theater, and so she would take me to musicals. It's just a magical miracle moment that the very first show I saw when I was a little boy was something called My Fair Lady. And I sat there next to my mother watching Julie Andrews and Rex Harrison. And I looked at that and I listened and I said to my mother, I want to do that. I knew that I want to make stuff. That's what I want to do. To have that in my blood. And I started making up songs and I started writing lyrics while I was studying classical music. And so all of that blended into the sort of what I guess is my style, which is sort of a classical structural sense, but that kind of hilarious sort of humor that you had in My Fair Lady, and of course that melodiousness. And it's funny how all these things came connected later on. I mean, later on, my dad was very friendly with a man named Herman Levin, who had produced My Fair Lady. And he used to go to the racetrack, and he and Mr. Levin and Julie Stein and all of those pals, they would sit and bet on horses and things like that, along with Alan J. Lerner, and Herman was like an uncle to me, and when it came time to do Nine the Musical, of course I had no rights to that. It was just a project, and because I loved it, and I write things to keep my pencil sharp, and because I write what I want to do and what I believe in. And so I had written this, and suddenly there was a lot of interest in doing that show. The producers are interested in it, and somebody said, well, in order for you to do that show, you're going to have the rights to Fellini's 8½. I had seen 8½when I was a 17-year-old. Because it was the time in the 60s when foreign films had really hit the world. It was Fellini, Antonioni, Satyajit Ray, Kurosawa, and Korea. And I went to see this film, 8½. And Fellini had done it. It was Fellini doing a movie about the Fellini doing this movie. But the character, he was having a midlife crisis, right? He had his wife, he had his mistress, right? And Fellini was having a midlife crisis because Fellini was doing a movie about Fellini having a midlife crisis. I looked at that screen at the age of 17. I don't know why. Well, I do now. And I said, I'm that guy. Why would a boy from Jersey City who had just gotten his driver's license and went out to Irvington, New Jersey, to an art house cinema to see, why would I say, I identify with that man? I knew it was my story. I don't know why. And when I grew up, that's what I wanted to write. Only much later did I understand that a man's midlife crisis is a second adolescence, right? Your first adolescence is, what's my sexuality? What's my relationship to the opposite sex? What do I want? What's my goal in life? What's my identity? How do I separate myself from all of those things? You go through that. That's your adolescence. Well, Fellini was doing a movie about a man in his second adolescence, which I saw exactly at the time when I was in my first adolescence. And that's how that's now I have come to understand. That's why I knew somehow I connected with that story. I understood what he was going through. And that's how Nine happened. Now, as you mentioned, Alan and Ed Cleveland and things like that, how that happened simply was that I had written this song called New Words, and Herman Levin had said to me, you really ought to, Alan J. Lerner really should hear this. And so Alan J. Lerner came up to his office, and I played the song for Alan J. Lerner. And he said to me, Oscar Hammerstein used to have me come by his office and give me pointers. You come by my office, and I'll give you pointers. That's how that worked. But how we got the rights to 8½ is a magical story. I got the telephone number of Fellini's lawyer, and I called him up in the middle of the morning, and he said, pronto, as they answer. And I said, hello, Mr. Salas, that was his name. This is my name, Maury Yeston. I've written a musical based on Fellini's great masterpiece movie, 8½. I would like to come to Italy to discuss acquiring the rights, the dramatic rights. And he said, excuse me, Signor Yeston, I don't speak English. So So I had traveled in Italy and I had taken a course as a university. So I was able to say, non fa niente, mi chiamo Maury Yeston, sono composer. I said the whole thing to him in Italian. And he said to me, bravo, signor Yeston, but we will only work with a well-known Broadway producer. And then I don't know where I got the courage or the guts or the whatever. And I said to him, well, would you not agree that Herman Levin is a well-known Broadway producer? Herman Levin produced My Fair Lady. Herman Levin discovered Carol Channing. Herman Levin produced The Gentleman to France. I said, well, I can come to Italy in a week or two and talk to you about acquiring the rights to 8½, representing myself and my partner, Herman Levin. So he said, okay, I'll see you. And I called Herman, who was like an uncle to me. And I said, Herman, can I go to Italy and say that I want to get the rights to 8½ for myself and for you as my partner? He said to me, sure, kid, but swing around the office before you go and sign a release, because he was a lawyer. So I went to Italy with the lawyer, and we had a conversation, and one thing led to another, and there we were with the rights to 8½.
Boy,
And
that's like a
astonishing.
fairy tale.
All these things are astonishing. You know, how BMI happened was that Lehman Engel had decided that he was going to create this workshop, and I think it was Lerner who said, you know, there's this workshop you really ought to go to. And I went there, and here was wonderful Herman Levin. And sitting there were these other people who had just never done it before. One of them was me. One of them was Edward Kleban. One of them was Alan Menken and the gang. And we did our songs and we did our projects, and Herman would give us pointers and criticism, and then we would come back with rewrites, and that's how we all honed our craft. So the first one to really break through was Ed. Ed got a chorus line, and my God Almighty, how fantastic! And I think then, you know, then I kind of broke through with 9, and then of course Alan did everything else. No, but interestingly about that, and you should actually, for all of your listeners and those of you who want to do musical theater or just do things in the world, this is how these things happen. You must dare, and if you want to do something, you just go for it, you know. So I had 9, and it had gotten to the point where the O'Neill Foundation had created this summer program. The first one that they did when they started it was Desire Under the Elms. The second one was 9 the Musical. I sent them my score, and they said, oh, we will mount this. And they found a young director whose name was Howard Ashman. And Howard came. Howard was so helpful there. He was creative, and he was a really tough critic too, and a wonderful guy. And the reading went very well. And we were having a cup of coffee towards the end of it. And he said, look, he confided in me. He said, you know, I write lyrics, and I'm looking for a composer. And I said, Howard, you have to meet my friend Alan Menken. You guys are made for each other. And that's how these things happen, you know. And then they did their wonderful work, and then of course came Disney, and that's how they wrote everything else that had to be done for Disney, except Lehman Engel died, and I took his chair for about 8 or 9 years, and sitting in front of me were all these new people. I don't know, Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson, and then she became Kristen Anderson Lopez. But then, you know, Bobby Lopez wrote Avenue Q, and then of course they wrote everything else. And so more and more and more. And so you see that workshop then became this extraordinary, for decades, siphon of young, talented people. So it's not necessarily young either, all moving their way on in their careers, starting from what Lehman Engel did, and then, as you see, we now have organizations and we now have places all over New York and all over the country where you can get your start. But we're the generation thanks to laymen, thanks to people like Alan J. Lerner, who took me under his wing, and that's how that started. And that's why I make sure I help out the next generation coming up.
And
That's
and do you ever? I mean, do you ever? If it's the Songwriting Hall of Fame, if it's BMI, if it's I have friends who have gotten the BMI award. It's such a big deal in musical
yes,
to present your works and get this award. It gets you in front of producers. It gets you funding. It gets you some cred. And
yeah.
your story, I think what you said, the nugget of information there is either we are brave or we're crazy or we're both. But when we want to do something in this artistic world, it takes some chutzpah and it takes some.
It does. But but the basis of it all is, and the best advice I can give to all of the young writers who are thinking about there is, no matter what, it's not you, it's not money, it's not who you know. I truly believe in my heart of hearts, unless you're living in a cellar, unless you're living in a missile silo somewhere in Nebraska, good work exerts its own pressure to be heard. Good work finds itself into the light of day. Honestly, it's a mystery. It's a puzzle. Honestly, I don't know how it happens, but when somebody writes a great song, somehow that song forces its way into the world. So just do the work, because any opportunity, any somebody you might meet, any interview you might have, anything doesn't mean anything if you don't have on the table before it a wonderful song.
Yeah.
Well,
my friend, I think they won a BMI award not too long ago. My friend Matt Gould, and
of course, yeah.
Matt says to me, it's a calling. It's like a cloak. It's like
it is. Yes, it's exactly right. I wanted to ask once, what makes you write? And he said to me, well, I guess I just must be neurotic in that direction. Yes, okay. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about, it's great writing. You were talking about Nine. I was lucky enough to see the revival of Nine, with this all-star. I'm doing an event with Sheeta Rivera on Monday.
Oh, how wonderful. Give her my love.
We're going to definitely be talking about her time in Nine, show-stopping that cast and that show. And that show came out. You put that show out. You did things like Grand Hotel, and you have shows running on Broadway. Titanic as a property, Titanic as a story. How did the idea come about that this would make it as a Broadway musical? And did you start writing it how did this happen?
I'm happy to tell you. So first of all, of course, until it happened, right, it was one of the great jokes about what would be the worst idea for work in the world for a musical. Oh, well, naturally, the worst maritime disaster in history with 1,000 and 2,000 people died in a few hours, right? The greatest failure in the history of the Industrial Revolution. Oh, what a great idea for a show. So, but and I'll talk about two people, me and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and both of us must have been nuts to do a horror movie. What was that? What was that? But you see, or how crazy was I to do an indecipherable Fellini movie that doesn't even have a storyline, right? So, but in each case, you have to trust your own instincts. You have to, well, if I'm passionate about this, if this interests me, maybe it'll be interesting to other people too. You have to, and you have to be brave about that. You cannot think like a producer. You cannot think, what should I write that I know will sell, that I know will succeed? You can't do that. You have to say, what am I so passionate about? What can I not stop thinking about? What gets me to a piano or to a guitar and gets the best work out of me? That's what you must do. In the case of Titanic, well, I guess we're getting around the great turn of the great millennium, right? The year 2000 was coming up, and so when you live through a period like that, you start thinking about history and start thinking about what are the really great events of the last 1,000 years, and if you go from 1900 more or less and the year 2000, because that's where we were, Titanic, and right the created a boundary line, because it's really a boundary line between that world and sort of the modern world that we're in. And not only in terms of our striving for accomplishment, but also our failures. And I thought to myself, Titanic, that's a really interesting thing. And I really couldn't stop thinking about it. And I started getting musical ideas about it. And I started thinking of it as what an incredible dream, to do that. And then I thought, well, yes, of course, it was a complete disaster. It was a complete failure. I understand that. But what was the motivation for it? Well, here's this industrial revolution, the British Empire. It was the apex of what you could do in engineering. They could do anything. And what was the most important thing? Well, they were the maritime capital of the world. They owned the seven seas. Everything that they had to do in terms of shipbuilding and Sheffield and all over, right? They were the peak. So they had the absolute most cutting edge industrial technology in the world at the service of one of the most important things that ran the world, which is simply just shipping, which made the world go round. And the worst thing that could happen, was that a ship could founder or sink and people would die. And so, just as Jonas Salk devoted his life to finding a vaccine that would keep you from getting polio, they thought we must devote our time and our life to the ultimate dream, to build a ship that would not sink. Because that way, what more could you do for mankind in preserving human life and avoiding victim after victim after victim ending up at the ocean bottom because of the failure of a ship? If we could build a ship that would not sink, and God knows, with English engineering, if we can't do it, no one can. And so off they went to accomplish that dream. And yes, they failed. But they failed in the service of wanting to improve the human race and to preserve life. It was as noble a project, despite the fact that because we're human, we failed. And as I was thinking about this project, sitting at my desk, the Challenger space shuttle blew up right over my head. The Challenger space shuttle, the apex of American space engineering, with three completely innocent, magnificent heroes, and they lost their lives. Mm-hmm. And it was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy in the service of a great dream to explore space, to make new things that would improve our knowledge and improve our health and improve our science. And so I thought, aha, that's my story. And that's the story I'm telling in Titanic. And I saw all of the positive aspects of it as a dream. Titanic is about dreams. And even though sometimes our fondest dreams fail, we still dream. They still went up there in that space shuttle, in spite of the fact they all knew its story. They all knew what happened to the Titanic. They all knew how not to be overconfident. And yet, we're human, and it happens. And I thought, that's the story I have to tell.
Ooh, and in 1997 at the L'Enfontaine Theater, where this premiered, it's folklore now. It's, I teach fifth grade during the day in North Bergen, speaking of
great.
And if you went into my classroom and you spoke to my 120 10-year-olds, every one of them will tell you they know Titanic. Every one of them will tell you they know the folklore about it. And it's one of those stories because it's about greed, it's about class, it's about money,
but also bravery and about adventure and about yes. But it's funny because it was I did research it. It's one of the 3 or 4 most common words known all over in every language all over the world. Everybody knows that word, and so everybody thought it was crazy, and everybody, I'll never forget Michael Riddle, who I love. And when he heard about it, you know what he wrote in? He wrote in his, when he heard about it, you know what he wrote in his weekly column? Maury Yeston is coming up with this idea of doing a musical based on the Titanic. Wow, watch him sing, watch him dance, watch him drown. He ate his. He told me he never ceases to apologize.
No,
No, but that's it, because you see then, and again, for everybody who's watching, and certainly those of you who want to write shows or do anything else in your life, yes, people will doubt, but if you have a conviction, just damn the torpedoes and go straight ahead,
that
because that is my most right now. That is my most performed show all over the world. There have been thousands of productions of it. I have either heard it or seen it in English, French, Japanese, Polish, German, in Czechoslovakia, in Korea, in China, everywhere, and it never ceases. It just completed its second all UK tour, obviously United Kingdom, and right now it's in Taiwan.
insane. It's been 26 years since it premiered on Broadway. It's been 10 years since the premiere of it in the London premiere.
Yeah.
The show went on to win 5 Tonys.
It was swept. It was nominated for 5. It won 5.
What, including Best Musical, including Best Score,
Right.
including Best Book.
What was the show that it beat? What was that it was nominated against?
I can look it up for us. Do you know? I'm sure you were there.
I'm trying to remember.
Let's look.
No, it wasn't. No, because I remember what happened with 9. With 9, well, of course, we were nominated against Dreamgirls.
Got it. Yes.
And Michael Bennett said to Tommy Toon, "Look here, why don't you just open your show after January, and then we'll come Tony Woodford, and then you do it next year." And it didn't happen that way.
No. Well, in '97, Titanic beat Steel Pier, The Life, and and Juan Darien.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
I know I was born in '83, so I was a youngster, obsessed with musical theater, obsessed with the Rosie O'Donnell show, obsessed with making my parents.
Rosie had the whole cast on her show. I'll never forget it. Yeah.
And once it was on, we needed to go see it, and it was a big, giant Broadway production, and the story and the music and what you wrote for this show, like the songs. When I was listening to it today, and I think of listening to Still and The Blame, and these. I was a kid listening to these because you humanized the Titanic and the people on it, and it didn't become a history book. It became a story.
No, it's just all about people and people's stories. And yes, this old Jewish couple, he was a millionaire, Mr. Strauss, and and so you said and they both here. These two wonderful old Jewish sweet people, and they have all the money in the world, and they're just on a romantic voyage at the end of their lives, and the ship's going to go down, and so. They pour a final drink. They drink a toast to each other, and when he drinks the toast, and he says, "To you," she says, "Who else?"
It's the most romantic, bittersweet.
And he says, "You know what? I love you now as much as I loved you the first day I met you, and the day that we got married." And I said, "That's got to be the song. Still, the way I love you, still." And again, just because we know we're talking now to so many of you out there who are wanting to be a critic or wanting to write shows. When you're in that situation, in that dramatic situation, and in a show, everything that's going to happen emotionally, everything important, has to happen in music, because we sing in musicals when we're in a situation where we're so filled with emotion we can no longer speak. He knows they're at the end of their lives. They're having their last glass of champagne together. And he's going to say, I love you now as much as I love you on the day that you married. And of course, in my head, I thought, well, of course. So they're actually marrying each other again. And because they're Jewish and they're holding champagne glasses, why wouldn't he? I love you then, and I love you still. And the music keeps going. He'll put his napkin on the glass, put it on the ground, and stamp on it like the end of a Jewish wedding. They literally consummate that marriage again. And I thought, all right, well, there won't be a dry seat in the house.
And there was.
And so that's how these things happen, And so I think sometimes what may be the worst idea in the world, or seems like the worst idea in the world, might not be.
And
Yeah.
it might
Oh,
end up being a great idea, and it may end
yeah.
up winning a Tony, and it may end up being done for 26 years, and now for 2 nights only, you can see it on the big screen.
That's right. That's right. As a matter of fact, it's this week. Yes, and there you are.
November 4th
So
and 8th.
now you should say this is Tom Sutherland's English production. Tom's a master. I hope you'll be able to interview him. Tom Sutherland is just a wonderful British director. He's a fantastic guy, and comes from a working class background, and of course nobody does Brits like the Brits.
Yeah.
It's an English ship. They're
Yes.
all Brits, and when they did it, it was just like, it was just like doing Fiddler in Israel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so everybody in that production that you'll see in this film is just pitch perfect English, whether it's aristocrat, working class, whatever, British Yiddish, which is a whole thing all by itself. It's exquisite, and it's because nobody does it like they do.
Yes.
And it's every part of it that I wrote that has a kind of a tint of Gilbert and Sullivan in it. They just take it to the nth degree. So and it's videoed brilliantly. It's kind of like it's like a big movie.
Yes.
And I think you'll enjoy it very much. I hope.
Well, if you're listening to us or watching us, you go to www.fathom, FATHOM events.com. It's 2 days. So you got to head to the theater on November 4th and November 8th. It's in over 700 screens. So it's somewhere in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's huge. And I should say, if you can't remember it, I mean, it's sort of perhaps an inapposite name of the production to be calling it a fathom, because Titanic is fathoms below. See, maybe it's just an accident.
When you see your body of work and you see it done around the world, and then you see the crop of new artists, is there, and I'm not trying to be controversial, but is there a thought about the way Broadway and theater is in the year 2023?
I think it's greater than ever. Don't forget, having taught the BMI Music Theater Workshop for over 25 years, I have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren from those sitting before me and writing their masterpieces. If it's Bobby Lopez, if it's of course my contemporaries, Alan Menken, if it's Lynn Ahrens, if it's Steve Flaherty, I watched all of them, brilliant geniuses. I mean, my participation in it was being able to sit there and say, okay, you go next. And every once in a while, maybe I was able to say something smart. But of course, how you learn in that workshop is the audience tells you, right? If you try something funny and they're not laughing, nobody has to say anything. I got to write a better joke. And so that really is, and it's a great part of what Lehman Engel gave to the world, and I'm so happy to have been a part of it. And as a matter of fact, 3 weeks ago, I guested a session. I called Pat Cook and said, "Can I come and be a visitor? I just want to see what the young people are doing nowadays." And I heard wonderful things that they were writing, and this will just go on and on and on. And I think today, that the steady progression and evolution of musical theater has to morph and has to become, has to reflect the world that we're in. When you're in a world of telecast, and you're in the world of live theater and semi-live theater and all kinds of different things, the musical theater is going to change. But tomorrow somebody's going to come in and put something on a stage that you've never thought of before, and it's going to be innovative. And as long as we have that, the musical theater is going to be the growing tip of a plant, that the new leaves that are just coming out of something that has roots that go back hundreds upon hundreds of years to Shakespeare. I was thinking about it because somebody was talking to me about Phantom, and I was thinking about that moment when Christine says to the Phantom, "I want to see your face. I love you. I love you so much. I can see your face." And he says, "No, no, 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 no." And she convinces. She sings a song called "My True Love." Right, open and change to me. And as the music goes, he takes the chance and he removes the mask, and she looks, and try as she may, she's a human being, and we have to believe that. And of course, his back has got to be to the audience, right? And so that it can be nothing that we could show you could be as bad as what you might imagine.
Right.
And so she can't help it, and she screams, and she runs off. And I had to write something there, and he, and I had this poem by Blake called "The Little Black Boy," and I had always loved this poem, the great William Blake. And it's a poem about, and it says, "My mother bore me in the southern wild," because right, so he's English. He must have been thinking about black people who they would have confronted in the Industrial Revolution when they went all over the world, when they were in the Caribbean, right? And he sings, "My mother bore me in the southern world. I live in darkness. My soul is black, but right. My face is black, but my soul is white. White, the complexion of the English child, but I am black and yet bereaved of light." And and he ends the poem by saying, "But one day the Lord, right, will relieve me of this," right? And if I could speak to him, I would look upon his face, and I would shield him from the sun, as I would be a dark shield, so his face would not burn, and I would be like him, and he would love me. And I always loved that song, and I thought, and Phantom would have the humanity to understand literature and greatness and beauty. He lived for beauty, and I thought, I'm going to set that song. And so, and he screams, and of course she runs away, and he sings. He starts to sing, "My mother bore me in the southern wild.
Ooh.
I live in darkness, but I'm bereaved of light." Right, and when he ends, and I will, and I will shield her from the sun, and she will then love me. And it just made sense. So you never know. You when you start a journey in the dark, into the woods, which is not only a great show and a great song, but that's what we do when we write. We just go into the woods, and we find a way through it. We make a path, and and so that's the writing process, and so everything I'm writing now is just like that. What we're looking for next year, and what we're looking towards, I think Encores is doing Titanic in June. I'm thrilled about that.
Yes.
We're hoping, there's a lot of talk about a third Nine revival, and some people are talking about that, and I of course encourage them to continue doing that. Somebody even spoke to me the other day about wanting to do something that's never happened, which is, we've never had a production of Phantom in New York. And so somebody wants to talk about doing that. And, well, it never made sense to me because, there is Phantom. Andrews has a magnificent show on Broadway, but that's not there anymore.
Right.
So that might be fun, to just,
Yes.
even for one night, that might be good. So there's a lot of talk about that. And there's a lot of talk about bringing Grand Hotel back as well. And then, of course, a Nine revival. So I feel very fortunate,
Well, Titanic, the cast, a little bit of the cast is announced for City Center. You got everyone, the tickets are going to go in a hot second.
Yeah.
And who knows what'll happen to it after it's there, like many shows there. And we are always, I want to say thank you for
Oh,
this musical theater Jersey kid. I want to say
yes.
thank
Well,
you for writing and giving your life to making great art and theater for all of us to enjoy.
thank you very much. I've had great uncles and grandparents, from Jerry Herman to Ruth Herman to Herman Levin to Julie Stein and to Alan J. Lerner and all the people who helped me out, Layman Engel, and I'm so grateful to them.
Well, and we're grateful for you and everyone
Right.
watching, no matter where you are in the world. Titanic, the musical, in cinemas November 4th and 8th. Only get your tickets at phantomevents.com. Thank you so much. It's an
Oh, it's
honor.
so great to talk to you, Robert.
I can't wait.
Okay.
I owe you a cup of coffee, and I want all
We'll
this
have it. You
done.
have my email. Okay, done.
That's it.
Okay, take
Thank
care.
you so
Bye-bye.
much. Well, there you go. How cute is he? How much history does he have? It's amazing. That is like musical theater history 101 right there, then and there. So fascinating. Can you imagine coming up with all those people? If you're a musical theater head, I'm so happy you enjoyed this interview. I hope you can go check out Titanic. I hope you check out us every single day here on the Broadway Podcast Network. Visit along with my other friends, listen to the other hosts and other people and other shows that are shared here. And you never know who's popping up on my show. You never know. We are for everything from R&B and hip hop to musical theater to TV chefs to reality stars. We just have them all. It's where artists come and talk about art. If you want more information about me, go to robertbannon.com. Follow me at Robert M. Bannon on the Instagram or at The Roundtable with Robert Bannon. My new album called Rewind is out, talking about music, my story of growing up in New Jersey. Just like Maury. If you want to hear it, go make sure you follow me on Spotify and check it out and give it a stream and a listen and a like. Hope to see you again real soon. Thanks for being here. As always, the best is always yet to come. See you next time here at the Roundtable.